Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome officially to the Retire Rich from Your Chiropractic Practice webinar. My name is Dr. Tom Preston, and I can see from some of the attendees, I've had the privilege of getting to know many of you over the years. So welcome, Dr. Dennis, Dr. Fraser, Dr. Eric, Dr. Bill, Dr. Richard, Dr. Marianne, another Dr. Richard, Dr. Bob. Nice to have you folks with me tonight. So really the question that we're set out to answer tonight is really, what is this thing called a chiropractic practice? And is there going to be a point in your practice career at some point where you believe you're going to slow down / retire from practice? I don't know exactly when that point's going to be, but every person I've ever chatted with has at some point said that they're going to slow down or retire. And really, if you're going to do that, and that's an inevitability of your practice, there's a bunch of issues to think through. And certainly one of them is, would you love to get compensated well for the great business you've built, yet you're not really sure how to do that, or what's involved, or how to maximize the revenue? We've all worked very diligently and in some cases, certainly in my case, early in my career, hard to build the practice. And I really felt like my practice was, one of my children. I thought it through, I gestated it, I birthed it, I groomed it. I did a lot of things to help it be the best version of itself that it could be. But knowing what was involved and how to build a successful practice was something I had to learn. Knowing how to actually get it set and ready to be systemized so that it could be as effective for my community, because isn't that the bottom line, folks? We want our practice to serve our communities. And one of the factors that I've been thinking a lot more about lately is the concept of succession planning, where we're thinking about not just our mortality and our lives and our ability to serve our communities throughout, us and or our team's lives, but what about setting up a system? What about setting up a business that can truly serve our communities for generations to come? Where we're starting to think more like my Native Indian friends who think about, decisions around the council fire were made thinking about how would it affect 7 generations from now? And so I think the true epitome of an unselfish chiropractor is someone who's planning succession planning in a way that their practice, the principles, the values, the great service they offer the community will outlive them. And the only way to do that I'm aware of is to create a very structured, very systemized practice that will allow a lower common denominator than maybe your great skill sets to come in, plug in, and do the job that you are doing at a similar, or hopefully at least approximate your level of efficiency. So if you would like to learn how to plan better for that eventuality of leaving your practice someday, if you'd like to learn more about how you could systemize and structure your business so that you can actually provide a better service while you're still in practice, if you'd like to learn a way to systemize and structure so you could possibly bring in a partner or associate someday, quite frankly, we're in the right spot. We are we're here to answer many of those questions. There's some things I'd like you to get out of tonight, but before I get into that, I'd really like to just tell you a little bit about my journey and how I sort of backed into this process of how to do practice appraisals and so on. Most chiropractors only do this once in their lives. Most of us have had no training or skill sets at it. And literally my background with it was I sold 2 practices without really good awareness of what it took to sell a practice, what was involved in the process. I just literally had an accountant and a lawyer kind of guess at what it was worth, and it seemed to turn out to be a reasonable number, so away we went ahead with it. But as a professional coach consultant in the profession now for over 18 years, with thousands of our colleagues, I kept getting asked for people to say, Coach, what do I do? I really feel like it's time to transition my practice, or to grow my practice, or to change my practice, or to leave my practice. And how do I evaluate, what do I do? And so the research that me and my team did, there really wasn't anybody in the marketplace at the time that I really felt was delivering the quality of service that I'd like to see from my clients. So literally I researched it, and using my extensive chiropractic knowledge, I've been in practice almost 30 years, as well as my business background, we actually started to do these, put together a system to evaluate the chiropractic practice, which we'll walk you through tonight. That system has been tweaked many times over the last 9 years. And one of the reasons we know we've got a really good system, a system that's reproducible, is because if a practice actually sells that we've evaluated, because sometimes we get called in for partnership breakups or divorces or something, but if someone does actually sell the practice, we track it, And usually the practices sell for between 90 and 110% of what we appraise them for. So in North America, we're pretty sure that our system is, matter of fact, we're dead sure that our system is very accurate, and it's giving us a accurate market value assessment relative to what the practice is worth on the open market. Key distinction there, folks, right, is we're talking about market value assessments here. We're not talking about some forensic auditing thing that an actuarial scientist would do or something, which has, in my opinion, no basis in reality. In some ways, selling a business is somewhat analogous to selling a piece of real estate. There's probably several prices, as my realtor buddies tell me. There's the price that you want to get. There's the price someone's willing to pay. There's what the market's bearing right now. There's what it could appraise for. There's several different prices, and the same thing is true of a chiropractic practice. So again, what we're doing is, what would it sell for on the open market today? That's what our system is designed to do, because I think that's the most practical, it's the most pragmatic way. And there's many, many, many components to that, which we'll talk about. One of the things we're currently proud of, and I'm very proud of my team that's involved in this whole process. It's a very labor-intensive process, folks. There's a lot of data collection in order to do this well, but my team was just honored recently by the Bank of Montreal here in Canada. We were put on their preferred provider list for our chiropractic practice valuations, and there's only 2 people on the list. So I was quite proud of that, and proud of my team and the great work that they're doing to give accurate market value assessments. So this is what I want to cover over the next 45 minutes or so. This is what I want you to walk away with, folks. Greater clarity about the process of a practice appraisal and what business principles that's based upon. I also want you to get an awareness of what you can do on the asset side of things to maximize your potential selling price. And folks, I'm not attached to whether you're considering this a year from now or 15 years from now. Because as my great mentor in the business world taught me years ago, that really you should be planning your exit strategy the day you get into a business. That's really where the wisdom is. And so again, I'm really hoping to enroll more people in our profession to start thinking more about the end game and planning how to do it well during the journey to get to the end game. Because if you do it well during the journey, you're going to be able to touch a lot more lives. You're going to be able to impact a lot more of humanity. And for me, folks, that's what's really great about our profession, is the huge impact we make on humanity to help them live better quality lives mentally, physically, spiritually, socially, and otherwise. Other thing I want you to get out of tonight is a possible game plan for what you can be doing to increase the selling price of your practice from a goodwill standpoint, which, as you'll learn, is by far the bigger component. We also want you to get an awareness of what you can do right now to maximize the profit of your practice while you get to serve more people in a more fulfilling and systemized way, which I've talked about several times. And finally, we'd like you to get a really clear understanding of what resources and items you need to get in line should you want to do a market value practice appraisal in the short term. So if those are things that you would like to learn about, then you're in the right spot. And the next 45 minutes is going to be not only a value to me, getting a chance to share my purpose in life, part of my purpose in life, but also valuable for you. So let's talk about what goes into determining the value of a business. There are 2 really basic components, folks. I don't care whether you're talking about a company like Apple, or you're talking about a chiropractic practice, or a mom and pop's laundromat. Basic concepts are this. There's 2 basic components: assets and goodwill. And assets are the things that you own. And very clearly, folks, it's the things that you own, not the things that you lease or the leasehold improvements if you don't own the building. I've talked to some docs that have, in my opinion, put a tremendous amount of, way too much money into leasehold improvements. I talked to a doc recently who put $250,000 into leasehold improvements. And it was really heartbreaking for them to realize that they didn't own that there was no market value to them in those things because they didn't own it. You can't sell something you don't own, folks, right? So again, assets are something that are important to make a business run, but you want to be smart about using the assets and building the asset base for the things that are necessary to help your business run without going, too overboard. Assets are set up on a depreciating market value basis, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Just want to give you sort of a 35,000 foot view. And of course, goodwill. It's way less tangible because it's not literally something you can physically hold in your hand. It's much more variable, but it definitely makes up the majority of the value of a chiropractic practice. Whereas in some more manufacturing type industries or businesses, a lot of times the assets actually make up the higher percentage. So again, assets and goodwill are the 2 things that you can literally bring together in a chiropractic practice that really makes up the valuation. When you think about goodwill, folks, I always like to use an example of like a very systemized and structured business like not that I eat there, but like the McDonald's, the big Golden Arch restaurants, right? When I had the privilege of traveling to New Zealand and Australia many years ago with my family, there was some of the food that we were being exposed to was a little bit unique, a little bit different. And there was one point where the kids just wanted something that they were used to. And literally, we walked into a McDonald's restaurant in Auckland, New Zealand, and it was literally, you couldn't tell whether I'd walked into one in Auckland, New Zealand, Toronto, Canada, Manhattan, New York, or Atlanta, Georgia. It was just set up the same. The systems were the same. The menu was the same. Everything was identical. And in a very structured, systemized business, you literally can plug in a lower common denominator, like you can plug in a 14-face, pimply-faced kid, and the system can run. That's goodwill, folks. That's reproducibility. That's really what we're talking about when we get talking about goodwill. It's the reproducibility of the end result. And just keep that in mind as we start to think about this. In particular, it's not just the end result relative to the service, but from an economics or from a banking perspective, it's reproducibility of the profit. And again, I really want to make sure we're focusing our conversation tonight around profit, because I've coached, invited to coach and consult in chiropractic practices that are doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in revenue, but because of the cost it takes them to produce the revenue, their profit is almost non-existent. I mean, literally not being able to make their lease or car payments in some months. So again, what we're talking about here is profit. And this is something, goodwill is definitely something that the banks are very nervous about, because it's not tangible, because a bank's purpose is to make money, like all businesses. And part of that for them is to protect the asset base of the shareholders. And so if you've got something tangible like a house or something, and the person defaults on payments and things go south, well, they can actually physically take that house and then resell it and get some of their basically the capital they've invested back. But when you've got goodwill and there's nothing tangible to actually get and to resell, it makes the banks very nervous. And that's why they're really focused on the preferred provider list with respect to getting appraisals. It's a little slightly different in the States, but not much. But in Canada right now, you literally can't get, from the big five banks, you can't get a bank loan without a properly done appraisal. So people are saying, oh, there's all these rules of thumb that I've heard out there. Like, I've heard all kinds of things, folks, like 1.5 times net, and average of the last 3 years of 60, 70, 80% of revenue. And I can tell you, we've run it through our system, folks. None of those wives' tales, none of those approximations are even close to reality. So please don't get duped into that, because you'll probably end up with an unrealistic figure in your head for what you think your practice is worth. Put it on the market, not be able to sell it because it's overpriced. Or sadly, put it on the market and it's underpriced, and you're giving up some of your blood, sweat, and tears relative to not being able to maximize the equity that you get out of it. Okay. Relative to assets, things, again, as we said earlier, talking about things that are tangible, things like chiropractic tables and computers and desks and chairs and those sorts of items. Basically, they're all set up on a declining or depreciating balance, which we'll talk about in a second. And usually I find assets in a chiropractic practice make up only 5, 10, 15% of the actual valuation of the practice. So it's not necessarily the by far the biggest part of it. I have seen it be as high as 45%, but actually almost approximately 50% once. But again, that's by far the rarity. It's usually the goodwill is the higher piece. So let's talk a little bit about depreciation and how you do that. It's on a declining balance. So if we were to use real numbers, say you bought a new chiropractic table for $3,000, literally a year later, it's worth about 25% less of that. Most depreciation runs between 20 and 30% on a declining balance per year. 25% is kind of a good rule of thumb on a declining balance. So again, if you look at if you can see the chart here. By the way, there is a button, if you scroll your mouse, usually to the top right of the slides that I'm sharing. There actually is a way to make them bigger on your screen. No way for me to make them bigger on your screen. There's a way for you to do that. So again, if we bought a table for $3,000, 25% less would be $750 less, which would make it worth $2,250 on the open market after 1 year. So if we take that balance and put it, that's the declining balance, and take another 25% off of that, or $562.50, then in year 2 it'd be worth $1,687.50. And again, if you follow that down, folks, that $3,000 table isn't worth a whole bunch within 5, 6 years. So where this caps out, or where it stops on assets, is in what we call market value. Because if you take a chiropractic table and it's been well upholstered and hasn't been abused and everything still goes up and down, that's meant to go up and down. You can buy that on the open market on Google or Planet Chiropractic, or here in Canada at some of the places like in the stores in Kitchener that Steve and Jan run. You can basically buy that for more than what it depreciates out at. Okay, so again, it's market value is really what you want to be looking at when you're looking at the value of the assets. All right, let's turn attention to goodwill and look at, there's many factors. I'm going to share with you some of the biggest ones that we've found over time. There's literally 11 of them here that I want you to focus on. There's far more that we use actually in our appraisal system, but in terms of giving you the ones that have the biggest bang for the buck. If you're someone that's on the call and one of the things you'd like to learn about is how to maximize your practice while you're still in practice, not just focusing on the end game, whether that's 1 or 10 or 20 years from now, then I encourage you to grab a pen and a paper and literally jot down some of these of the 11 that I'm going to share with you, and literally rate yourself from 1 to 10 with where you score. And there's a possibility then if these, and again, 10 would be high, 1 would be low relative to that little example. And what I'd encourage you to do is look at ways you could take things that are a 3 or a 4 in your practice and make them a 7, 8, 9, or 10. Not only be able to serve humanity to a higher level, which is probably one of the things you're most excited about, as am I, but also too, the reciprocation you'll receive for that expanded service will be increased revenue to be able to do the things that you are entitled to and meant to do in your life, like give back to your church, your synagogue, feed and clothe your family, and many of the other things that you choose to do with that revenue. So one of the first ones to look at is literally location. Where is the practice located in the community? Is it central and or in a really convenient spot with good visibility and good road traffic? Or is it, hidden in the back 50 somewhere and hard to find at the back end of a strip mall, or I've even seen some practices in the back end of an industrial center. So literally location in the community is one of the factors that can increase the probability that any other chiropractor come into that practice and reproduce the same level of profit that you are doing in that. Because again, it's all about reproducibility of profit, folks, right? So again, you can imagine, if you're in a nice location, more foot traffic, more visibility, people know that's where the chiropractic office is. Anybody else is likely to come in and run that practice after you're done with it, or come in as a partner or associate, and you're going to continue with that foot traffic or that high visibility. So that's one factor. Second one is your lease. There's many forms of lease, but literally when you're looking at the type of lease that you have, and the landlord and how much time is left on it and what options are there, and do you have right of first refusal relative to literally or non-competition relative to your region with your landlord? Are there 1 or 2 different renewal dates or possibilities for you, lease renewal options for you? How long are those? Are they at set amounts or are they at market value? There's lots of different factors involved in lease. And in this day and age, folks, there's hardly any new buyers that will consider buying a practice that doesn't have a signed lease. I know in many jurisdictions, particularly more rural places of Canada and America and even Europe, the handshake and month to month is something that's commonly done. I can tell you that is a deterrent for most buyers because it scares them, because they don't know that they can have the same relationship with the landlord that you have. There's a lot of instability. And so therefore the long-term reproducibility of the profit, which is always the piece here, folks, when we're talking about retiring rich from your practice and being able to do a proper succession plan or exit strategy from your business, it's always about that reproducibility. Third one is literally the office space itself. Is it set up for convenient traffic flow for the practice members and the team? And is it a modern, aesthetically pleasing space? This is one place, one metric we have that leasehold improvements will influence the selling price, but it won't necessarily, like that guy that I was talking to that did the $250K in leaseholds, he's not going to get even close to that back out of that, right? Certainly in our escalating scale for this metric, if there is a nice space, it's more modern and more pleasing, it'll get a higher grade on the reproducibility factor than one that's not set up well. In fact, I had the privilege last fall of consulting with a doc out in Calgary that I've coached with on and off over the years. He invited me out to do an in-house consult with him and his team and do some team building and so forth. Anyways, and I just loved this office. It was amazing. It was beautiful. It was well lit. There was lots of natural light. The traffic flow was awesome for the team and for the practice members. And I was just literally singing the praises of this place to him and telling him what a great job I thought he'd done. And he kind of looked at me and smiled. He goes, "You forgot, Coach, right?" And I said, "Forgot what?" He goes, "You designed this space about 2 years ago." So that was a kind of a backhanded compliment, I guess. Not too good for my memory, but possibly good for what I perceive to be good traffic flow in an office. Again, if you're wanting to maximize your efficiency and effectiveness in practice, your reproducibility, grab a pen and a paper, score yourself from 1 to 10 on these different goodwill characteristics that we're talking through. Another one is literally how established the practice is. How long has the practice been in the community, and particularly at this location? There are some practices that I've evaluated, they've been in the same location for like 65, 75 years. Well, in that community, particularly smaller communities or regional communities within a big city, it's like people know that's the chiropractic office. And they may or may not understand why they should be seeing a chiropractor. They may not understand what it is you're trying to educate them on, to the value of the service you provide. But in their mind, if they're thinking chiropractor, they're thinking that particular location. So again, new person coming in, it increases the likelihood that people are going to keep coming to that space if it's been well established. It's a new practice, something that's really hard to do anything with except just literally be there for more years. But again, it is something that does play a factor on the reproducibility of the practice sale. Technique. Is the technique common that you use, and is it recognizable, to the public? I've evaluated some practices that use some very, very eccentric techniques, sort of the wearing the ruby red slippers and clicking the heels together twice on a blue moon kind of a technique. Nothing wrong with that. I'm sure it's very effective. The doc certainly believed in it, got great results. So certainly I'm not questioning or poo-pooing technique choice. But in terms of reproducibility for another doc coming in, there are more common, if you will, techniques that are more commonly taught in the colleges and are more commonly used by a greater percentage of people. So again, if you think about it, folks, right, chiropractic practices are kind of unique. There's only, depending upon who you read, 65 or 70,000 chiropractors on planet Earth of the 7 billion of us on the planet. Well, when you're thinking about transitioning, then you're really thinking about a really small percentage of the populace. You're not marketing to the entire populace, but you're marketing to those people who largely have a chiropractic practice license. Not even a practice license, but one in your country, one in your province or state or territory or jurisdiction. So again, you really have taken your 7 billion possible buyers down to a very small number, which is why historically it takes 6 to 12 months to sell a chiropractic practice in North America. And certainly, if you're using a commonly used technique, things like, CBP and Gonstead and Diversified and Activator and these kinds of techniques are more recognizable by the public, more common in the marketplace, and therefore more likely to be recognized and therefore will up the goodwill factor. Your team. Do you have a team? Is it trained or do they refer? I think a really good team member should be referring at least 1 to 2 new clients per month into the office. Are they going to stay on once the practice sells when you transition? As a result of thinking about a well-trained team, do you have regular team meetings and team quarterly evaluations? Is there mechanisms for growth? Do you use in-house training, or do you literally periodically bring in outside trainers? Like at Full Circle, we have an outside CHA trainer that is amazing, 12 years experience in the field, and just does great jobs at bringing teams, to the next level. So again, why is it important to have a well-trained, well-functioning, high-profile team? Well, of course, again, we're talking about reproducibility. You can come in and plug in a lower skilled doc, less charismatic, less pretty, maybe, than you are. And again, with a well-coined, well-placed, well-trained team, they'll increase the probability that they're going to create the same great results that you have in the practice. Literally, the practice focus. Is the practice more focused on acute care, or is it more wellness care focused? Because an acute care practice, generally speaking, costs more to run because it's more dependent upon new clients. So there's more marketing, more client acquisition costs, if you will, to get really technical in the business world. Whereas if you're more wellness focused, it's less dependence on new clients, and therefore the reproducibility factor tends to go up, goodwill factor is up, and so therefore the value of the practice is going to go up as well. The clientele too, literally, which type of clientele? Is it a generalized client demographic or more of a niche in the community? I've I've worked with evaluated different practices where they just work with the East Indian community, or they only work with children, or they just work with geriatrics, or they just work with athletes. And again, there's nothing wrong with any of that, of course, but a more generalized demographic increases the likelihood that any other doc could come in and produce those same results. Again, I keep beating this drum, folks, hopefully you've heard me, but we're talking about reproducibility here over and over again. Are the office and financial policies clearly defined and reviewed with the clients? Are they educated well and regularly about the health and functional benefits of chiropractic care? As a result of this, what's the PVA of the practice? The higher the PVA, the more likely it's reproducible to somebody else coming in. Therefore, the higher the goodwill coefficient. Therefore, the more value on the open market. So it's all of these kinds of factors, folks, that play pretty significant roles. Let's talk about systems. This is something that I love, the acronym for systems if you haven't been exposed to it. Systems, the acronym is saving yourself significant time, energy, and money. And so again, you want to look at how systemized and structured the office is to educate the clients. And again, even looking at the systems, there's some that are very doctor-based. It takes a highly charismatic, high-energy doc to be able to pull those systems off. Again, nothing wrong with that. It's not right or wrong. We're not having a moral discussion. But it's less likely that another doc could come in and be that same charismatic, high-energy person. So the more team-based and the more structured they are, the better. One system that's commonly overlooked in chiropractic practices is a marketing plan. And I don't mean just, oh, this is a good idea, I think I should do this. I mean literally a written marketing plan. We've got an amazing marketing plan template. Be happy to share with you. If you're interested, just shoot me a private email. Be happy to shoot that off to you. It's a great way to put all of your marketing ideas one place at one time. Track the return on investment from it, track the hours it takes to produce the results, all of the different factors involved. So again, if you don't have a written marketing plan, I highly suggest you do, and that you're tracking it, and you're tracking your return on investment so that you know which are the things you're doing that are actually producing results. You're not guessing. Most docs are guessing. They don't have a clue, and their marketing consists of doing very little because they get comfortable until the practice dips. And then they're like, ah, crap, I better get marketing. And they go out and do some talks or screenings or lunch and learns or, whatever it is that makes their practice hum. And they get it back up again. And then, they get comfortable and it dips again. And it's just this roller coaster. That is not boding well for goodwill coefficient and for reproducibility of the outcome. Number 10, passive income streams. Are there any passive income streams? Any therapists? Is there in some offices, a rehab area, depending upon your philosophy? Do you have nutrition? Do you have supplements? Is there, and if you do have passive income streams in your clinic, are they systemized and therefore reliable and reproducible? Again, it's just that reproducibility factor, that reliability factor that really plays the biggest role in all of these things that we're talking about. Again, you may choose not to have it. That's fine. It's just not going to make your practice worth as much down the road somewhere. And finally, the last one we're going to talk about is in the digital world. We live definitely in a digital world, in case you hadn't noticed. This company that's literally celebrated its 17th birthday in the next year or so, Google. Hard to believe Google is not even 20 years old yet. I mean, it's a friggin' noun and a verb in our culture today. But literally, how digitally savvy is the practice? Again, we're looking at that reproducibility piece, right? Does the practice have a website, and is it attracting new clients? It's one thing to say I have a website. It's another thing to say that it's actually working and attracting new clients. Another thing that's really coming into vogue right now in the healthcare world is reputation marketing. And do you have reputation marketing set up, like Google reviews and Yelp reviews and this kind of stuff? Third-party endorsement is becoming bigger and bigger all the time as people have realized that there's been a lot of junk and crap out on the internet. And so they're looking to, not so much trust people that are tooting their own horn, so to speak. They're looking for third-party endorsement from other people that have been to your clinic and have got great service and are willing to, to tell the world about it. So again, these are things that increase the reproducibility of the outcome that you're achieving. Again, the key factor, folks, when we're talking about, the value of the practice down the road somewhere is not what you can do. What you can do is amazing. I'm sure you're talented and fabulous and gorgeous and doing a great work. There's no questions about that. The question is what's the likelihood of somebody else coming in, another doc coming in and reproducing those same results? That's really what this conversation about goodwill, boils down to. Okay. All right, because again, if you think about it, a buyer that's coming in, whether it's an investment buyer, which I'm starting to see more of in the chiropractic marketplace, or whether we're talking about, a traditional doc coming in and buying a practice, or occasionally I'll see a series of really high-end CHAs come in and buy a practice and then hire a doc to work with. That's pretty cool. I've seen that happen twice. Really what they're looking at is their return on investment. If they're going to invest, tens or hundreds of thousands or, of dollars into buying this practice, what's the likelihood, because there are no guarantees in life, but what's the probability, what's the likelihood that they can produce a similar result down the road somewhere, so that they can look at their cash flow, look at the asset that they've just put forth, the money they've just put forth, the investment they've put forth, and what's the likelihood that they can get a good return on investment for that money they've invested. That's really what they're thinking about and what they're looking at. All right, now let's talk about amplifiers. Those are the main factors, or some of the more important factors on goodwill. If you're someone that's a note taker like I am, I'm hoping you took some notes. You rated yourself from 1 to 10 on each one of those factors. If they're not all 10s, folks, I would encourage you to set a game plan, an action plan up for how to expand those and how to make them 10s. Not only because of, again, I keep saying this, but not just because of the long-term benefit to you getting the most value you can when you do transition into practice, but also so that you can provide an even greater, more consistent service to your community in the short term while you're still in practice. Okay, amplifiers are things we've just learned from experience that increase the likelihood that buyers are going to want to do this. And so these amplifiers are percentages. They run from 5 to 25% in our system. The first one we're going to talk about is geography. Is the city or town a popular location where lots of docs would like to live, or is it remote, isolated, so it's less desirable to your average chiropractor? Was a great little practice in a very small community here in Canada, in Ontario, where I live, in a little town called Bancroft, Ontario, below Algonquin Park. And a phenomenal practice, very wellness-based, had a great valuation, very fairly priced. And as I made it clear to the doc, I would buy that practice in a heartbeat. And we didn't really have to work on selling the practice. The practice, stats, sold themselves. What we had to sell them was on the location, right? We had to literally sell them. About half of our job when we actually help docs sell their practices, which is the service our company provides, is literally 50% is selling the practice and the value of the practice, 50% selling the location. So again, interesting enough, more people are looking for mid to bigger cities. Rural areas are actually a place I'd like to practice and raise my children, but I'm not seeing as many people requesting that. So again, that's not necessarily something you can do or change if you love your location, but it is just an amplifier. I want you to be aware that it is something that can actually increase the valuation when it's all said and done. Overhead. This is actually this is becoming a much bigger issue today amongst the really savvy buyers, because they're getting good counsel from their coaches, advisors, and from their accountants and so on. The industry average right now in North America is running about 50 to 55%. So you want to look at how your overhead stacks up relative to industry average. Again, less overhead is better. It means you're taking home a higher percentage of your revenue. That's a good thing. Charity is something my wife and I believe in very strongly, and we have many charities we support, but business is not about charity. Business is about business, and part of the purpose of business is fulfilling your purpose, serving your community, and so on, but it's also about making a profit. And so in this case, looking at your overhead is something that's really important. One thing I would encourage you to do, if you've never done this exercise before, is go to your financial statements, your unaudited financial statements, look at each line item, talk to your team about it, and literally assign your team members a line item and see what they can do to decrease that cost on an ongoing basis. If they can take your phone costs from $4,000 to $3,000 and save you $1,000 a year for the foreseeable future, what I've done with my team is I said, I will give you 50% of every dollar you save us in the first year. Well, what team member, if they have some spare time, wouldn't want to earn an extra $500 to use that example? So again, looking at your overhead, there's definitely a lot you can do about overhead. And decreasing that, of course, something that we focus on here at our company. So if you'd like to have a conversation about how to do that, certainly would be open to having that dialogue with you. Another amplifier, the third amplifier, are literally lease options. Is there an option for renewal on the lease, and if so, for how long and at what rate? And this comes up in goodwill, but we've also found it to be such a strong one that it actually does show up in our amplifiers as well. Growth and ongoing growth. Everybody loves a winner, folks, right? Whether you're betting on a horse, you're betting on a business, you're betting on a stock. everybody loves to bet on and buy into a winner. So is the practice in a consistent growth phase, or is it flat or declining? And certainly for those docs that we've helped sell their practices, where they've seen the biggest ROI for the fee that we charge is literally letting us handle all the hassles, all the details, all the paperwork, all the stuff, all the negotiation, and let them stay focused on what it is they do best, which is practicing chiropractic and serving their communities. Now, the distraction that comes up when you're selling your practice, folks, can be huge. I've seen practices literally dip 15, 20, 25% in 3 to 6 months while people are all distracted about their practice. Well, depending upon the size of your practice, that's thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. Our fee for service on that is certainly a lot less than that. And certainly for me, that's where the leverage comes in for someone to invest in our company's service to help them sell their practice, if that's something they're interested in, by just literally allowing them to stay focused on what it is they do. So looking at growth is an important factor. Crisis versus wellness care. We're definitely getting a lot more requests for wellness care based practices based upon PVA. It's not the greatest stat, as we all know, but it is a reasonable one. People are definitely looking for higher PVA because they know that the clients there tend to be better educated. They tend to be in it for, are more focused on their health for the long term, not just for the short term. And so therefore looking at ways to increase your PVA is, which is very doable, is something to consider. It will definitely amplify the valuation of your practice. The building, we're actually seeing an increasing number of people that are actually looking to get into a little bit of real estate as well. So if you happen to own the building that you practice in and you're willing to sell it as well as the practice, it can actually increase the valuation as well, because it kind of becomes a two for one, right? And a lot of times docs are willing to play a little bit with the price on both sides if they're able to sell both the asset that is the building and the asset that is the practice. And finally, one of the other ones, folks, which is actually a really big factor today, particularly it's been a bigger factor since '08 when credit got a lot tighter, based upon the subprime mortgage mess in the US, which bled into other countries like Canada. The lenders just tightened their belts a little bit, right? They got a little bit nervous. And as a result of that, there wasn't the ease of credit and lending money as there used to be. So if the vendor, if you, the doc, is willing to finance some or all of the deal, it can and will escalate the value, because what it does is it increases the top of the buying funnel. You're ruling out people. If you can't finance and they can't get financing, obviously you're ruling out and you're making a smaller number of people that might consider buying if you look at it as a funnel. Whereas if there's more options for financing and better options for financing just the banks, again, it widens out. Having said that, I'm not a big fan of docs carrying the entire, dollar value. I've never seen it go south yet. I've never seen it go bad in all the years I've been doing this. But again, there is that possibility. Most docs when they're leaving their practice, just want to get emotionally untied from it and be gone. But again, in today's day and age, the banks aren't willing to always lend the whole value, because the goodwill is the higher percentage of the practice sale price. And so carrying some of the paper, carrying some of the note, it actually can be a great tax advantage to docs, depending upon whether you're set up as a solopreneurship or as a corporation, professional corp. So again, those are more advisor questions for your accountant to ask, but it's not a bad thing. If you're willing to do it, it definitely can be an amplifier on the final valuation price. All right, we're going to talk about resources and tools here, but before we do that, I really just want to talk a little bit about how, by looking at these different things we've talked about, looking particularly at the goodwill factors and some of the amplifiers, how if you're willing to focus on those things and create an action plan for how to maximize those. And again, if you're looking for some assistance in that because you're not too sure how to do it, you've been trying for a while and you're not getting the results you want, certainly I'd be more than happy to have a complimentary, no charge assessment of your practice and your needs, chat with you about the possibilities our company may have to be able to help you with that. If you're someone that's business savvy enough, you think you can do it on your own, more power to you, that's great. But be sure you have a game plan. You have what they call key performance indicators or benchmarks to know that you're on the right path, and a way to assess and have someone hold you accountable to getting, the changes that you want to get. If you look at the percentage of the, humanity that we're serving, folks, as chiropractors, I'm often go between dismayed to pissed off. Again, I've heard all kinds of numbers about the percentage of market, we're actually serving. But if you look at real numbers of like, not so much people being seen several times a week, but people being seen at least once and not multiple times over the course of a week, we're really seeing a very small percentage. The numbers I keep hearing now is running right around 2% of the population. So on the one hand, it's despicable, but on the other hand, it's never been a better time to be a chiropractor because, you know, the marketplace is ready for what it is we have to offer. All we have to do is do a great job at educating them and doing it well. I think of a Dr. Glenn out in Alberta that I took on as a client several years ago. Great practice, doing very well, pretty profitable, serving a significant hundreds and hundreds of people a week. And he came to us to literally to work on two things. And that was the team growth side of it, the reproducibility factor, and also the systemization of his practice. It was not as structured as it could be. We worked on those two factors pretty much exclusively over the course of the 9 to 12 months we worked together. And literally his practice just exploded. It literally doubled in revenue. He had a 1,600% growth spurt relative to the investment of time, energy, and money. Those are things that are possible, folks, you know, if you're just willing to put the effort into. And of course, the biggest benefactor is his community, right? There are more people under care, and more people under care is really one of my things that I would like to see happen, you know, in the world. So if you do want to get an appraisal done, here are some things that you're going to need to get access to. And again, I'm really beating this drum hard, folks, that I'm really hoping people are going to start to be more proactive and preventative with getting appraisals done so that they can, you know, make plans here to maximize their reproducibility and maximize their profit down the road, as well as their service to humanity in the process. So again, obviously it's a product, a service that our company offers. It might sound a little bit biased here as to why I'm encouraging you to get a practice appraisal done. But again, if you look at communication, folks, right, 93% is nonverbal. It's not the words we're saying to our clients that they get. It's what's behind the words. And if we're teaching and preaching prevention, and yes, Mrs. Smith, I know your 3-day-old baby doesn't have any back pain, but I want to see her so she can maximize her expression of life. And there's places in our life where we're incongruent and we're not practicing prevention and proactivity. The power of our words are not as strong in the biggest part of communication, which is nonverbal. And literally there's people that just aren't getting what we're saying, or they're not trusting what we're saying. They don't even know why. It's happening at like a subconscious level, but it's because we haven't looked at the incongruencies in our own lives and cleaned them up. So again, lots of reasons, folks, for getting this done. It's not a very expensive process. It's under $2,000. All right, resources and tools, financial statements. Get the last 3 years' financial statements together from your accountant and review them with your bookkeeper or accountant to find out where the ethical deductions are in the statements that can be added back to the revenue. In other words, every accountant that's worth their salt is probably saving at least their fee for you in taxes, ethical taxes, ethical tax deductions. So again, a lot of times docs will, you know, have a cell phone. It's not all used for business, but they write it off to business. There are things like going to a seminar and they stay a couple of days, but they write it off to business. They take their spouse out for dinner, they write it off to business. And again, I'm not judging people that's right, wrong, or indifferent. I've done things like that. My accountant encouraged me to do things like that. But those are not true costs to run the business. So what you want to do is back out all of those things to get a more accurate actual overhead percentage. Because from an accountant standpoint, he wants your overhead to be as high as possible. But from an appraisal standpoint, you want it to be as low as possible. So you want to take out all the fluff, basically. Okay? You want to definitely create an asset list, which is literally as simple as going into each and every room in your clinic and writing down what's in there and when it was purchased, for what amount, what the depreciated asset value is down to market value. And again, we've got a whole host of resources that we use in our company to really double check all this stuff. But literally, Google, great resource to be able to help you get that thing started. Your marketing plan, make sure you have a marketing plan, make sure it's up to date, make sure it's being used, make sure your team is supporting you on it, make sure you're tracking the hours and dollars invested so you can actually track your ROI. Really important concepts here relative to a marketing plan. You want to make sure all your policies and manuals are up to date, that they're not photocopies of photocopies, that I would suggest that every policy and manual in your practice should be looked at least every 6 months. Just, you know, get your team to do this. You don't have to do this, folks, right? But get your team to do it, go through it, make sure it's how you are currently practicing so that it stays up to date, whether you call it an operations manual, office policy manual, team manual, whatever it is, the different manuals, those are important resources and tools. Office schematic floor plan, draw one up to scale or ask your building supervisor or manager to get you one. You get office pictures, go into each and every space in your office and get some JPEGs. And literally label what they are, because those are important aspects. In our company, we don't literally do an on-site visit. It's just literally time and cash flow prohibitive. It's very expensive. We can get inside your practice by looking at office pictures. And finally, I want you to think through this concept of confidentiality. A lot of times docs want it, to be very hush-hush that they might consider selling their practice someday, or that it's on the market or going to be put on the market. They're afraid that, people aren't going to come back to their clinic if they know they're leaving. I have not found this to be the case. It's counterintuitive, folks. I did have a case recently in the Ottawa area here in Canada where literally a doc didn't tell their long-term team member that they were like 26-year team member, partner in the business, that they were thinking about selling their practice. She somehow inadvertently found out through her daughter who knew somebody. It's amazing how people find out about this, folks, right? So the whole idea of keeping it a secret seems like a good idea, but in reality, it's usually not. So you want to think through at what level you want to. I definitely recommend and enroll you in telling your team that you're considering this and why you're considering this, getting clarity from them about that so they can support you in it. In this case, this assistant was such a office manager I was talking about in Ottawa, was so ticked off that literally she threatened to quit. And because she was the glue that bound the entire thing together, the practice was going to just plummet, wasn't going to be worth as much. The doc called me in a panic. Well, what do I do? I said, A, you apologize. B, you buy her some flowers. C, you apologize again. D, you go. And, E, you make it up to her. And literally ended up costing $15,000. She wanted to have basically a severance package done up in advance because that's another issue that comes up when you get into selling a practice is severance packages for existing employees. Because if they're going to stay on, that's a burden that goes on to the new purchaser. So again, think through that whole confidentiality piece. We've talked a lot about succession planning, folks. I definitely think this is something I'd like to see chiropractors do more of. Thinking about how can they pass the torch? How can they bring on somebody in a longer term plan to bring them into the practice, to teach them the ropes, to show them the ropes, to eventually have them take over the practice and or expand the practice. Talking about team training and making sure your team is up to speed and doing a great job. Those are all important factors in succession planning. Again, who really wins in this, folks, is humanity. It's your community that wins because they're actually going to be able to have the benefits of the values and principles that you've set in your community, that you're helping people function at a higher level physically, mentally, socially, and otherwise. And, I'm really admiring some of the Japanese businesses I'm studying right now. Some of these companies are so into the big picture. They're literally setting up 500-year business plans, things that will serve their children's children, right? Again, maybe we don't need to get quite that grandiose, but even just setting up a succession plan for the next 50 to 100 years in your community, how that community can be well served by what it is you're doing there, that's really something I think is wise. And one tool to start that is a practice appraisal to see where you stand now, and a game plan set up for how to move that to the next level, which again, if you're interested, we'd be happy to help you do that. All right, we talked about succession planning, so let's go in as we start to wrap this one up tonight, folks. If you are someone that are in the situation where you see the value of creating the Nexus Strategy succession plan, or you got on the call because you are thinking about retiring and passing the torch on, certainly we'd be honored to talk to you about our company and the service we provide. This is actually a picture, if you can see the graphic there, the slide, it's a picture of our homepage website right now. Just click on the circle part there, the chiropractic practice valuation, and it'll take you through, literally give you some details about the structure and how it works and what the costs are and all of that stuff, what's involved. Again, as I said, sadly, it's very labor intensive. It does take some time. Usually takes somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks to actually do one once we've got all of the data from you. So again, there is a process. There are many steps involved. It's not something you can just rip off, like that. Again, I really discourage people from getting into these wives' tales that exist in our profession. 1.5 times net, 60-70% of revenue. You're probably either going to overvalue the practice and not be able to sell it, or undervalue it and give away some of your, blood, sweat, and tears, which I really would strongly not recommend. Just as a final thought, if you're someone that would really like to get into not just some of these goodwill factors and things we've talked about, we actually are doing a live program here in a few weeks in Toronto, Ontario. It's what we call our focus program, because in my belief system, and certainly my experience now, 18 years of professional coach consultant, thousands of clients, mostly in the chiropractic profession, it's not just about getting more or new data, folks, that really helps you get to the next place in your life or your practice. It's about applying that data. And so what is it that blocks people or stops you or inhibits you from applying the information that you know? And this is what we call, in our system, we call focus blocks. And we've devoted an entire weekend program to it. It's $277 in Toronto. It runs Saturday noon to 8 and Sunday from 8 to 3. So everybody can get home for dinner on Sunday night, and you can even, you don't have to, if you practice Saturday morning, you don't even have to give that up. We'd love to chat with you about that. If you're interested, just go to seminar/drtompreston.com. That's seminar/drtompreston.com, and you can read all about that program. Again, it's designed to remove focus blocks that are maybe inhibiting you and or your team from expressing, the biggest and bestest within you and allowing your community to benefit the most possible from the great service that you provide. So those are the things that I wanted to cover tonight, folks. I'm more than happy to stay around for a couple of minutes because we're ending a little wee bit early to be able to go over any questions that people might have. If I hit the right magic buttons here, I should be able to literally open the line up to be able to have you come on and be able to, obviously you can tell I'm pausing for time here. So let's see which buttons or series of buttons I actually have to hit in order to get you guys to be able to come on live.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
All right, so if you press *6 on your phone, folks, or literally just go to your little microphone picture with your mouse, you should be able to ask any questions you have. Bill, thanks for the feedback. I really appreciate that. Have a good evening. If you're probably like me and you're a hockey fan, you're going to be going to watch Tampa Bay beat up on the Rangers pretty soon. But again, if you just go and unmute your microphone, folks, I'd love to chat with you and answer any immediate questions you have. Or again, certainly type a message into the chat. I'd be happy to address it there. All right, well, I would suggest from the slight pause there that probably at this point I've either bored you to death or I've done a reasonable job and I've answered a lot of your questions. Thanks, Dr. Fraser. I appreciate the feedback. So if there are no questions, certainly I'll take my leave. If you do have a specific question or maybe on a little more personal level or you'd like to just chat with me personally, I'd love to do that. My email is a real simple one. It's drtom@drtompreston.com. That's drtom@drtompreston.com. Drop me a line. Happy to answer any specific questions about your particular situation. Love meeting, chatting with my colleagues, my friends. So again, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks, Richard. I really appreciate your feedback. Dr. Michael, chatting with you on Tuesday, so that's great. Dennis, thanks again for that. I appreciate your feedback. So again, folks, thanks so much for being with us tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care, and good night, everybody.